know what they saw. They saw what we saw. They saw the frail elderly man who needed help getting off the stage. They're just too chicken shit to tell us about it because they accurately deduce that he could still be the Democratic nominee and they don't want to ding him up. Maybe you give Barbara a pass. Who gives a damn what this singer saw or says? But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel happens to be employed by ABC, which happens to have a rather large news organization. And he has been one of President Trump's most vocal critics. Where are you, Jimmy? On vacation? Not good enough. You can still use your thumbs to send out a tweet. You could set the record straight right now, but you won't.
What happens when Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly join forces for a roast, and Jimmy Kimmel ends up in the hot seat? Spoiler, it's less about laughs and more like a public takedown. From ego-shaking jabs to sharp truths with extra bite, this roast turns into a full-blown blaze, and Kimmel's right in the middle. Get ready, because this isn't your typical celebrity clash. It's a verbal wrecking match, and Jimmy showed up unprepared. What did he say that lit the fuse? Stick around, it's wilder than a trending Twitter storm.
All of a sudden, the ideology shifts because so many people are compromised by this very thing that we were talking about before. The very thing that they use to control the media in terms of the news, they use it to control the media in terms of late night talk shows and monologues as well. It's the same influence because they're the same sponsors. The same people are spending the same money on the same networks, and it has an impact. If it affects your livelihood and affects your future and your ability to do this thing that you love doing, which is hosting a talk show, and you're doing it on a network that is paid for by that money, guess what?
Once upon a time in the world of late-night TV and polished charm, Jimmy Kimmel was the king of comedy chaos, the guy known for beer skits and over-the-top stunts. Fast forward to today, and he's almost the spiritual guide of Hollywood, reacting to controversies with the same hands that once celebrated silly jokes. So what changed? Well, Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly have their own ideas, and they didn't exactly hold back.
This past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal.
Oh.
Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah. Now, if you are of the left, that's fine. If you are of the right and happen to just say, hey, people used to wear blackface and nobody freaked out about it, you get...
First up entered Joe Rogan, M&A commentator, podcast powerhouse, and full-time force against sugar-coated nonsense. Rogan doesn't tiptoe around critiques. He charges in like a caffeine-fueled rhino with a grudge against fake acts. For Joe, Kimmel isn't just a late-night host. He's an artifact, a relic from a time when comedy meant something different.
That sort of self-censorship and the idea of being a more empathetic person is a good thing, right? But as long as it's reasonable. But the thing is, the problem with that kind of stuff is it continues to go in the same direction where more and more things become forbidden and toxic.
Rogan's view isn't about personal drama, it's about a deeper disappointment. When you build a career as the everyman, the guy who says what others won't, seeing someone like Kimmel turn into Hollywood's moral watchdog feels like finding your favorite dive bar now serves gluten-free kale shots with motivational quotes. It's betrayal with a laugh track. Kimmel's change, or decline, depending on how you see it, plays out like a sketch from a satire show.
The Elon Musk joking around about my pronouns are prosecute Fauci. Jimmy Kimmel made a tweet back to him. He said, your pronouns are ass and hole. Which is pretty funny. But then...
Did he really?
Yes. And so then I read that, and there was people saying, please don't joke about pronouns. It's transphobic to joke about pronouns. So they were chiding him for participating in a joke about pronouns.
So Jimmy Kimmel was doing it. He was doing it too.
Yeah, he was doing it.
The man who once rode the comedy line like a rodeo bull now holds a golden moral compass that always points toward applause. Rogan, always on the hunt for authenticity, smells the change from miles away. It's not just a shift, it's a full career makeover. And nothing says I'm still edgy like repeating the same old political sermon wrapped in safe jokes approved by HR. Rogan's world, by contrast, is messy, chaotic, sometimes wild, but always brutally real, a place where people disagree without blowing up. Kimmel, meanwhile, seems to have chosen the safety of Hollywood's agreement. What Rogan sees is a man who traded his comedic soul for social media clout, once unpredictable, now completely safe. It's like watching a punk rocker from the 90s turn into a Whole Foods spokesperson. Sure, he still tells jokes, but now they come with disclaimers and warnings. Comedy that used to hit hard now lands like a corporate memo. And then there's the late-night scene Kimmel lives in, not just sanitized but bleached, scrubbed, and wrapped up perfectly for the algorithm. Rogan looks around and sees clones, same jokes, same politics, same punchlines. No risk, no bite. Late night has become a daycare for ideologues, and Kimmel is sadly the head caretaker.
Morning show with Stephanopoulos into the evening Academy Awards broadcast with Kimmel and ABC elevating, the blackface lovin' Kimmel. They, at the same time, fired Chris Harrison, host of The Bachelor, for trying to defend one contestant on, The Bachelorette for saying, gee, I know I went to this antebellum party, a couple years ago. I guess I didn't see anything wrong with it. And all he said was, are we judging her by today's standards or are we judging her by, old standards, whatever. He was basically trying to say, are we being too hard on her? Got fired. Chris Harrison has to be fired by ABC. I don't know why, because he's not a committed leftist, because he's not out there more saying all the terrible things about Republicans that Jimmy Kimmel says. So this is them saying, we get it. We're an ally, right? And I guess maybe they're trying to make up with their racist past, without ever...
Cue the transition music, because now gliding in with a precise strike is Megyn Kelly. If Rogan's critiques hit like a sledgehammer, Kelly's approach is more like an autopsy, surgical, clinical, and completely unflinching. She doesn't rely on stand-up or jokes. She comes armed with a scalpel called media hypocrisy, and Kimmel is a prime example. Where Rogan sees a fallen comic, Kelly sees a media puppet, not a clown, but a polished mouthpiece for an industry that only cares as long as the numbers add up. In her eyes, Kimmel's change isn't growth, it's strategy. He didn't evolve, he pivoted. He noticed the winds of political virtue and taped a sail to his suit. Kelly has no patience for performative empathy, especially when paired with a past that conveniently fades away in selective outrage. Once the king of crude, Kimmel is now the moral sheriff, but only when it's safe. Funny how redemption arcs line up perfectly with contract renewals, almost like they're scheduled. She points out the magic trick. Kimmel preaches from a pedestal built on the very behavior he now condemns, and Hollywood cheers. Not because they believe him, but because he's useful.
Hypocrisy is alive and well amongst these sanctimonious leftists. From Kimmel to De Niro to Stephanopoulos, they want you to believe they're better than you, more virtuous, more decent. But we all know the truth. They lie. They sin. They do the very things they accuse you of and the things that they say they would never do. Evil things, like try to destroy people based on feigned outrage from which they spare their own.
The media loves a redemption story, as long as the redeemed join the choir. And Jimmy, he's practically the lead soprano. But here's where it gets interesting. While Kelly breaks down the PR moves and scripted apologies, she also exposes the real reasons behind them. Kimmel doesn't get a pass because he's sorry, he gets one because he switched sides. It's not about morals. It's about fitting the market. Morals are optional, loyalty to the narrative is required. So now, two very different critiques target the same man. Rogan calls out the plastic shell where a comedian once stood, while Kelly shines a light on the empty suit behind the media curtain. Both are painfully accurate. Rogan sees a genuine voice smothered by studio polish and approval chasing. Kelly sees a strategic chameleon shifting just enough to survive each outrage cycle. Together, they make the most unlikely duo in cultural commentary, one swinging a bat, the other filing a report. The only thing missing is popcorn. The comedy itself isn't even the problem anymore, it's that it doesn't even try. Kimmel, who once pushed boundaries, now just watches over them. His monologues are less about jokes and more about showing he did his homework.
They were saying that his tweet is transphobic.
Do you think that's, in that case, do you think that's him or a writer? Can't you tell?
Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
No, it's him for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
good. That's a good one.
He's a comic.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, he used to host the Man Show. I mean, he's done some pretty outrageous shit back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, for hee-hees and haw-haws.
No, that's a good joke on top of a good joke.
Yeah, it's a good joke.
The viewers didn't tune in to be graded. They tuned in to laugh. Somewhere along the way, jokes turned into sermons and punchlines became TED talks with applause signs. That's what Rogan and Kelly point out, the absurdity of it all. A guy who once stood for irreverence now delivers scripted outrage. A comedian who used to expose hypocrisy now schedules it. There's no rebellion left, just rebranding. And the big irony in today's media: the more Kimmel moralizes, the more hollow it sounds. Not because morals are bad, but because it's so clearly staged. Every tearful speech, every crafted outrage comes pre-packaged for social media. It's sincerity by committee. So what's the cost? For one, late-night TV has become an echo chamber so loud it can't hear itself. Rogan watches from his chaotic bunker and wonders when comedy turned into a PowerPoint. Kelly, sipping espresso in her media war room, watches the same crash happen again and again. Kimmel, stuck in the middle, says nothing, but he doesn't have to. His silence speaks louder than his monologues, because at the end of the day, it's not what he says, it's what he's become. A punchline without a setup, a moral compass with a brand deal, a performer in a play no one finds funny anymore.
Tell you, he's not the worst. The Daily Show has the worst ratings. They only have 366,000 people watching that show. During the Jon Stewart years, it was over 2 million. Now it's down to 300,000. Seth Meyers, absolutely dreadful. He doesn't even have 1 million, 778,000. I mean, for network television, this is, you don't have to pay for it. It's there when you turn on your TV, you plug it in. That's a dreadful number. Greg Gutfeld on cable, which you do have to pay for, it has more than double the numbers of Seth Meyers. Jimmy Kimmel, 1.5 million, averaging, also equally horrible.
Rogan and Kelly didn't debate him. They didn't even invite him to the roast. They just saw the act and called it what it is: a sitcom without a script, a sermon with a laugh track, an empire built on irony now selling sincerity at half price. And here's where it starts to feel like a Netflix documentary called The Day the Clown Cried for Ratings. Because when Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly both end up dragging Jimmy Kimmel through the same mud puddle, one swinging like a blunt force philosopher, the other dissecting him like a high-stakes trial prep, you know something deeper is going on beneath the laughter. Let's break down the simple but brutal equation: authenticity versus performance. Joe Rogan's whole thing is being raw, unfiltered, and sometimes offensive enough to give PR teams heart palpitations. He's never tried to be lovable, and that's the appeal. Kimmel, on the other hand, has turned into something like a human press release. His once edgy comedic soul is long gone, probably traded for a nicer hairstyle and a moral high ground with a scenic view.
They want to shut me down on being on McAfee. They want to shut me up from...
Well, that was the Kimmel thing, right?
Well, no.
Did you ever talk to that dude? Have you ever talked to him?
I've been on the show years ago, yeah.
Would you ever have a conversation with him in person?
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, they wanted me to be on the show in the summertime after I got traded.
Really?
There obviously been some things that he had said about me that made me go, I don't know if I want to do that.
It's like watching a former punk rocker show up at a PTA meeting wearing khakis, passionately arguing about gluten-free cupcakes. The man who used to mock Hollywood is now Hollywood itself, wrapped in branded virtue and sprinkled with whatever the internet finds acceptable this week. Rogan's take? Kimmel isn't evolving, he's dissolving into a safe, applause-seeking puddle. Then there's Megyn Kelly, who arrives like a corporate investigator holding the receipts. She doesn't care that Kimmel used to be funny, she's more focused on how completely he's been repackaged and resold. To her, the change is too perfectly timed to be genuine growth. It's less personal evolution, more moral Botox. Looks clean, feels fake, and needs regular touch-ups to stay relevant. Together, they don't just critique the man, they expose the system he now thrives in. That brings us to the lost art of comedy. Remember when comedians took risks? When jokes made people uncomfortable, squirm, maybe even rethink their beliefs? Yeah, those were the days. Now comedy's been sedated, neutered, and tossed in a branded merch store where every punchline must be approved by PR and sanitized for your safety.
Serious questions about whether any of this is true. I mean, in every job I've ever worked, I've had people who would jump through brick walls for me, and I can be a tough boss. I'm not an asshole, but I'll say, like, that was a shitty packet. Like, we need to do better. That was not okay. And the team, my team loves me, and I love my team because we are all about putting out great work product. And I'm quick to compliment too. Like, what did he say? He basically said, "Are you okay? Seriously, do you need help? That's causing people to lose their hair." People need to toughen up. Your workplace is not your
Rogan sees this and shouts into his microphone about it. Kelly notices and raises a chilling eyebrow, but the conclusion is the same. We've swapped real laughter for clapter. Audience applause not for what's funny, but for what's ideologically correct. It's comedy as a sermon, with Kimmel playing the self-righteous preacher, reading from the gospel of whatever's trending. And the media, it's not just enabling this, it's begging for more. The safer, more digestible, more elite-approved your content is, the more coverage you get. Kimmel doesn't just survive in this world. He thrives because he's the model, the prototype, the late-night host 2.0. Now with 50% less edge and 100% more moral superiority. So here we stand at a cultural crossroads. On one side, the Rogans and Kellys, flawed but fiercely independent, swinging wildly at the padded walls of the media bubble. On the other, the Kimmels, smiling through rehearsed sincerity and polished monologues, floating on the surface of public approval like a duck in a $4,000 suit. But this isn't just about one man losing his comedic backbone. It's about an entire entertainment industry that's forgotten how to laugh, unless it's at pre-approved targets. It's about satire that used to bite, now settling for gentle nibbling, like a tofu pyramid.
I don't think that conversation is a conversation that should be held in front of an audience in 5-minute chunks, like they do on television.
Yeah.
That's a conversation that you have to let air out. I want to know why you think the way you think. Him, sit down with Jimmy. Why do you think the way you think? Why would you think that it's okay to say that it's a real simple thing? The people that have been vaccinated, you treat them. And the people that took horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy. Really? Is that real?
It's about what happens when comedians stop challenging the powerful and start brunching with them instead. Because when comedy forgets who it's supposed to mock, the punchline isn't just weak, it's tragic. Need a visual? Picture this. A clown once known for flipping tables now sits quietly at one, sipping herbal tea and nodding politely as studio execs praise him for being brave. Meanwhile, the crowd isn't laughing, they're clapping, desperately pretending what they just heard was comedy, not confession. So yeah, Rogan swung the hammer, Kelly brought the scalpel, but it wasn't just about Kimmel. They were both dissecting the same thing, the artificial, calculated, and humorless soul of modern media. The scary part? The punchline landed. The scarier part? It wasn't even funny. Late night used to feel like a bar at 2 a.m., chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes inappropriate, but always honest. Now it feels like a team-building seminar hosted by someone who used to be fun. And if anyone's wondering where the spark went, Rogan and Kelly just handed you the map. Because when Joe Rogan, the human Molotov cocktail, and Making Kelly, the PR assassin, both circle the same target, you don't get an interview. You get an autopsy. And the subject isn't just Kimmel, it's everything he now represents.
The day when I was on the prime time of Fox and you were on the prime time of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Pierce. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there. Look at this.
Hey there. How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate.
Just get over yourselves. Honestly, it's so pathetic.
The culture of fake growth, the illusion of bravery and echo chambers, the idea that comedy is only okay if it flatters the right people. Rogan and Kelly didn't just call out Jimmy Kimmel. They exposed the entire structure holding up his show. And they didn't do it with anger. They did it with disappointment, sarcasm, and a well-earned side eye. The kind of ridicule that doesn't yell, it smirks. No need for a mic drop because the silence that follows is louder. So the next time Kimmel climbs up on his moral lifeguard chair to warn America about the dangers of mean tweets, maybe pause and ask yourself, are you watching a comedian or a commercial for the latest flavor of Kool-Aid? The jokes used to be the point. Now they're just a delivery system for the lecture. And if you're still laughing, Rogan and Kelly have just one question. At what cost? Welcome to the roast that didn't need a stage. Just two critics, a hollow brain.